Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to the Week 2 webinar. Today we are joined by a guest speaker who is going to take us through a presentation and a demo on data security. And so if you have any questions for our guest speaker today, please make sure to add them to the Q&A section on Zoom, and we will answer those questions during the session as well as at the end during the Q&A section. So today we are joined by our guest speaker, Mr. Peter Elolu. Peter is a cybersecurity professional working with Postbank Uganda for the last 4 years, where he takes the role of information security supervisor. He's a certified professional penetration tester and reverse engineer, and has been in the security field for over 6 years, supporting in different domains like vulnerability management, incident response, malware research, and reverse engineering with multiple organizations locally and remotely. He spends most of his free time teaching local communities on the importance of cybersecurity, and has supported outreach programs like PICO CTF grow within the Ugandan community. Without much further ado, welcome Mr. Elolu.
Thank you, Patricia. That was quite long. It has me smiling. Thank you for the introduction. Well, I want to start by introducing the topic today. Today we're going to be discussing data security and basically understanding the importance of data, and also how management of data is very important in our day-to-day operations. So we'll start by understanding how do we define data. Basically, data is information that can be collected, stored, and used for various purposes. In this case, it can be in different types: text, audio, video, and also different types of data structures in this case. So we find that information in this case is defined in different types. For example, when we're looking at data, we look at it as structured, and also we define it as unstructured data. So structured data is normally what we would look at as that information, data that is organized. It's probably being stored in a different, in a known format. For example, spreadsheets, databases, and then we also do have the unstructured that we look at as, for example, email, social media, and video, and all the likes. And all these also contribute to the different types of data. So when we are looking at where we normally get from data, we look at what we interact with directly, and also where we collect data from indirectly. And this basically defines what we look at as sources of our data. So we have primary sources. That's where, of course, maybe, for example, you organize surveys, and you get feedback from people, and you actually interacting with this data. Then also some, for example, that you find that they're research papers, they're online databases, and we also go and interact and get this information and make it definitely available for us. So what's the importance of data? Data can be used for multiple things, but we've come to just show the importance of data from a small point of view, as we can see on the slide. Currently, we all know that information, in this case, we're in the information age, and we definitely know that information stroke data is basically more priced than oil, than gold, than most of these different minerals that we basically have. And that basically shows you the importance of data. So we can use data for decision making. For example, if I want to make a decision based on a specific variables, in this case, I need to be able to understand that what am I getting into, and what conditions allow me to make a specific decision. We see people doing research. We have seen, for example, different organizations engage in critical research around health, around Like, for example, as we've seen the pandemic, we saw organizations coming up with different types of medicines, but all that was people creating databases, different health experts sharing information and showing their research around specific results that they're obtaining from their labs. And definitely, this was used to make vaccines. We have seen, for example, how I could also look at just the importance of information. For example, how social media has been used in different countries. Like recently in Kenya, there was the finance bill that failed being passed. We see, for example, that when it was unveiled to the common man and different people reviewed and came up with a decision that they had to, for example, fail this bill because of the information they obtained, and they use that information basically to make a decision. So we realize, for example, we have seen robots being created in different markets. In this case, for example, stock markets, forex markets. We all see that we have creation of, for example, bots that are basically used for decision making, but they base on data that has been collected over a specific period of time T, and they actually use them to predict trends for decisions to be made. So this basically shows you the importance of why we need data and how important data is for us in our day-to-day lives. So what do you look at as good data? We look at 5 core characteristics of good data. We're looking at accuracy, completeness, consistency, timeliness, and relevance. When we're looking at this, we want to ensure that the data we're using is correct and free from errors. In this case, you need to be able to use to make decisions based on accurate information. If someone gives you information that is incorrect, you're probably going to make a bad judgment based on that data, and definitely not get the outcome that you definitely looking at. Then we also look at, for example, consistency of data. You don't want your data changing from a specific point A, maybe say in a system, you're using data. Let's take a scenario of a medical health system. You want to ensure that your systems do not vary depending on the kind of information that patients that is collected from patients, because you need to ensure that one, this information is the same, and once it's the same, for example, across multiple systems, you find that it's used for making the right judgment. And we also need to know that data should be obtained. It should be updated continuously. That's where we come in with the component of timeliness. We should ensure that we keep our data up to date, because with emerging trends, we will definitely require to use latest data for making decisions, and this has to be available for us. So basically, this gives us a review around the major characteristics of good data. So when we're looking at the data lifecycle, we need to understand that how do we collect data, how do we store it, how do we process, analyze, and also how do we destroy data that we don't probably need. So for example, you're going to say, I am going to organize a survey. You're going to probably say, okay, I'm going to, depending if it's an online survey, you're going to probably open up a Google Sheet. Then from there, you probably share a link to different users and say, okay, for example, I'm trying to get a response around this specific project or whatever you're actually trying to collect. Depending on the data, you need to know that once you've gotten that information, where are you going to store it? Are you going to store it in a database, some cloud server that you have no idea of, or a place X? And then remember now that once you've gotten that data, you have to organize the data depending on the objective of why you're collecting that data. That's now what we look at as processing. and then you have to make use of the data by actually giving it value for why probably you're running that specific campaign. Then you have to, of course, give feedback, in this case, to different stakeholders, what you observed in your analysis. And then you also have to, of course, ensure to know when, what period of time you need. There's different policies within different organizations and different countries that definitely regulate how data is stored and for how long it's kept. Then we look at data security. Now, data security is the component where we actually start to understand, for example, how do we secure the data that we are working with, and what are the objectives basically? What are the objectives of trying to secure this data? When we are defining data security, we're looking at implementing controls to ensure that this data is not accessed by unauthorized people, it's not altered, and it's also not just destroyed or lost. So when we are looking at the key objectives, we look at what we call the CIA triad, which is basically confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And confidentiality, from the confidentiality point of view, you're basically looking at access, levels of access. For example, if I have a cleaner, and if I have a cleaner and I have maybe the CEO of a company, I don't expect that what I'm communicating to the CEO in this case is the same information I'm going to relay to a cleaner. So there are different levels in this case of access that you can probably give a cleaner, and that information you're not going to be giving it to, for example, the CEO of a certain organization. So with confidentiality, you're basically looking at people accessing basically what they need to access. Then when we're looking at integrity, the integrity component comes around avoiding data not changing from the point where it's being sent to a point where it's being received from. We should not have this data. For example, someone is saying my account balance is 1,000, and then when you're probably you've given someone a cheat, and there's this example that's normally given. I don't know whether you have seen it before, where there is a line of people who are standing next to each other, and in that line, they are holding a paper behind each other's back, and each other is trying to draw a stroke of, for example, what they are trying to depict. It can be, for example, a cat, it can be a number, a string, anything that's written, and the first person writes, the next one follows. And what you normally see is, from the start, someone could have a full cat that has been drawn, but at the end, you have something that is different. And definitely just shows you the power of how when data is moving, it can change from one state to another. And at that point, we would believe that there has been a loss of integrity of this data. When we look at availability, we're basically looking at, is my data available when I need it, for example? And with data security, you need to ensure that once someone is requesting for a specific resource, they should be able to access it within the specific required time that they need to access it. So when we're looking at the components of data security, there are multiple components. In this case, we're discussing the core 7. When we look at access control, we're looking at logs, biometrics. For example, you're in a room, in your office, you have a door, basically, that is acting as a physical control to a specific access to a specific place. So that door basically is providing security, for example, for the laptops that are seated within that office, and it's basically what we look at as a control way to ensure that, one, people without access are unable to get in and maybe get access to your computers and the likes. Then when we look at encryption basically looks at changing data to an unreadable format by using different form of encryption algorithms. And here, basically, you have a key that is used to decrypt this jumbled up data. And with this, you can be able to obtain what you initially were encrypting by actually using a certain form of key. So there are different types of encryption algorithms and different ways to definitely change a specific format of text or image in a way that it's unreadable and someone cannot easily access it. We also look at encryption from a point, for example, when we look at workstations, in this case, laptops. I think we have scenarios where we do encryption of our hard disks. They think there is BitLocker encryption, basically, that is implemented on Windows. And that can basically help you encrypt your hard disk. And if your computer was stolen, you would definitely also be targeting the other component of security, in this case, data loss prevention, because your data, even though your computer has been stolen, is inaccessible and definitely secure. So when we look at data masking and anonymization, here, of course, I think most of us, when we are shopping, you get a receipt, and on that receipt, you normally see a number 1, 2, and then maybe star, and then maybe say XYZ. That's normally what we look at define as masking. Those asterisks that you see on a receipt basically hide the sensitive information, in this case, account numbers, and in that process, basically, you're definitely protecting those an attacker from being able to read that specific information. With firewalls and intrusion detection systems, these ones, we normally implement them at the network level, basically, to ensure that, one, we keep out unwanted access. We keep out unwanted users from accessing some critical components of, for example, a network, by implementing different rules to ensure that, one, with the IDX, we're able to detect, and with the firewalls, we're able to block that access. Then we also look at database backups and recovery. This is basically where you have probably an external hard drive where you store your critical information once maybe in a specific time T. Or for example, you use cloud services like we have OneDrive, you have Google Drive to store some of your information. I think most of us have, I would like to believe that most of us have Google accounts, I would like to think. And back then, we realized that we have, like, for example, Google Photos. You can, for example, log into your Gmail, and when you go to actually for storage, you see that your storage is worn out. But when you probably go and look at maybe trying to create more storage, you actually find that most times there are other things that you have been using on your phone that are being backed up onto your Google Drive to ensure that should there be a scenario where you lose a device, you can easily get this back. So data loss prevention, there we look at, for example, securing or protecting sensitive information from being shared to external parties. And there are different solutions that I normally used at the web level and also in organizations that are conscious about security, that implement different solutions. So also, of course, another component, of course, is the people. And we have to train people in order to understand how they can secure their data by creating, one, policies that guide them on how to behave around data, and also training them to ensure that they are aware of areas where they can lose data. So what challenges do we normally face with data security? Of course, there is always the evolving threat landscape. This is basically where we look at changing environments. We look at insider risks. This is basically where we're looking at internal employees or subcontractors that you bring within your organization. And these are the same people who can probably access sensitive data and carry it out. Then we also look at issues to do with regulatory compliance. We have, of course, various legal and regulatory standards that are basically implemented across different countries. And you find that, for example, when there is a breach and sensitive information is shared, probably, for example, you can look at where there are dumps on what we look at as the dark web, or different areas where this information can be leaked. You're required by some regulators to report this information, and also some organizations are fined. They are fined specific percentages, or depending on the area of which you come from, to ensure that, one, organizations are critical around data security and ensuring that the information they interact with, mostly if it's for their customers, is kept private and secure. Then, of course, we have the complexity. We have technology is evolving every year. We find that, for example, a system that was built depending on a specific component has now different multiple integrations. For example, people build a product, and then there are different people who build products at a functional level, and they just come and integrate their solution. So you find that one, you had a system that was maybe one, and now you're interacting with multiple different functions from different service third-party providers, and you find that this definitely makes your environment bigger and also harder for you to secure the data that you'll be working with. So when we look at the importance, we think it's the importance of implementing data security is, one, we want to protect our sensitive information. We want to prevent organizations closing due to breaches, and then also we want to ensure that we have trust with our customers, partners, and stakeholders, and also regulatory compliance, as we had highlighted. So the best practices that you do in order to ensure that your data is safe would be to conduct regular assessments. You can implement strong access controls, that's biometric. You can have a door. You can have a laptop lock on the desk. Then you also ensure that you encrypt sensitive information. Then you regularly update your system to ensure that you're not compromised. Teach your employees, and also teach them how to be part of the first responders. In this case, the people who report when they think that there has been a data breach. So with this, I would like to show a small demo. Most times we find that, for example, we are browsing the internet. So I don't know how many of us have heard of what we look at as these third-party services that we normally share with these third-party services that we normally want so badly. For example, we're looking at external functionality. So you're in an organization, and or you're in your home, and you want to, for example, you want to convert a PDF to a Word document. Most times we find these things that we look at, for example, these applications, we find them very effective, but we most times do not exactly understand what these platforms are actually doing with the data that we give them. And one time you can upload sensitive information here, thinking that, for example, you're actually uploading your information to get processed. But what you get from there is something, the Word document in this case, as you requested. Now, one, you can consider that you don't know where these people, what these people do with the information you put here. You also don't know that, for example, these people, or the third party or the threat actor who could have set up a malicious page like this, if they want one, can infect the documents that you're going to be accessing, that they give to you, with some form of macros, and these macros can definitely be used to compromise you as a user. So it's also something that we like to avoid. So instead of actually uploading sensitive information here, you can always try to inquire from the IT person within your organization that, well, I want to do this, and how best can I do it? And then maybe the person can help you do something that could actually save you from being a target. Then we also, for example, we interact with Microsoft Word a lot. In this case, we have our second demo. I have a sheet here that I have that Wilson sent to Robert. So Wilson is a system administrator, and Robert is an IT staff. So Wilson has implemented a host, or in this case a server, and that he wants Robert to access. So he writes a cheat and then he sends it to Robert. Now, when Wilson sends this cheat to Robert, for example, find the password, please find the current password to the system. Please change to a strong one. So in this case, this is sensitive information that is being shared. Yes, a threat actor or someone who is malicious can intercept and be able to access this specific system X with this password and be able to do damage to that specific organization. And basically, what would you recommend that Wilson does? So Wilson is definitely someone who was not thinking about security when he was sharing this document. Now, how do we help Wilson be a better person, in this case, secure their document? So when we look at, for example, when we're trying to access this sensitive information, and we double click it, we're just able to open our document. But if Wilson wanted to secure this document, all they would have to do would be to go to File, go to Information, and then we see, oh, there is a protect document option that offers different types of controls. In this case, we are looking at encrypting with a password. So he can implement his password and then set it. So in this case, a password has been set to secure this document. So when Wilson, for example, saves his document and sends it to Robert, on accessing this document, Robert will be asked for the password in order to access this document. So when Robert is, for example, Wilson sends the document to Robert on email, and then he sends the password on a different channel, maybe SMS. So you find that with the password, Robert is able to access this document securely, and a threat actor who intercepts this document will not be able to access that specific document without that specific password. So with that, we go back to understanding the importance of data security. And with those two demos, we're able to understand why we should not upload information onto unknown third-party sites, and also how we can better protect our documents using Word. So with this, I would like to definitely put in a conclusion that data security is very essential, and we as the first level at all levels in this case, because you can be an individual, you can be an organization, you can be a group of people, and the most important thing you need to know that information can be used against you, and as a user, you should be able to, one, know what kind of information you're carrying, what it can be used for, how you secure it, and for example, there are things that we're normally told not to do in our organizations. You're told not to write down your passwords on scripts of paper and have them just lying around, have them just lying around your desk, because someone can be able, one, to just access that password and they're able to log on to your computer. Someone can shoulder surf you, basically be above your shoulder and be able to see what you're doing on your computer. So we need to be very cautious of the different spaces we're in. And with this, I would like to conclude and pass back to Patricia. I hope it has been a lovely session.
Thank you very much, Peter. I can see a lot of people saying that it was wonderful and they enjoyed it. So now we are going to go to the Q&A section. We have about 8 questions for now. So if you have any other questions, please add them to the list and we'll be able to get to them because we have a bit of time to go through the questions that you've asked. So the first question is, could you please clarify about data versus information, or can we use the words interchangeably? Peter?
Thank you, Patricia. Well, in most cases, we find that there is a misuse of the two, basically. But as we look at this definition, we look at data being information that is processed, that is collected, stored, and used for various purposes. Basically, we're looking at data is basically what we look at as processed information, because with information, you actually build up to what we look at as data. So that is something that is interchanged over time because one contributes to the other. So it's something that I would explain from that point of view.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see, another question. Could you please clarify about decision making through data? I think that was, I don't know, slide 3 or 4. Could you clarify about how data can be used for decision making?
Okay, so for example, I'm in my organization, and I report to a supervisor who reports to a head of a department. Imagine, for example, you want to understand one. You're selling a product. For example, let's say you're selling books, and you want to know that one, I have three shops that I supply books. I have given them five books each, and over time, when I go to collect, I find that maybe shop A has sold the 5 books, shop B has sold 1 book, shop C has probably sold 3 books. And then I go over a period of time, I keep adding these people books, and I realize that one, I'm giving them the same volume, but one is selling more than the other. So as a supplier in this case, I will notice that one, if A can move more volume, I need to supply A with more stock, and probably the area where shop A has many people who love these specific types of books, and reduce the volume that I'm probably going to be giving to shop B, because I need to ensure that one, I'm actually able to sell as many books as I can. And with that traffic, I know that if I take 10 books to shop A, 3 books to shop B, and maybe 5 to shop C, I can basically still sell my 15 books easily without actually, within a short period of time, than when I give off the same books and I have to go, shop A is done and they're waiting on stock and things like that. So with that information, basically, I was able to get feedback from one, how the different shops are selling these products. And with the account, I'm able to make a decision of how I'm able to supply.
Thank you for that example. I think it clarifies on how data can be used for decision making. There's another question about secondary data. So what indicators should be used to determine the accuracy of secondary data over networks?
Okay, when we're looking at a network level, we have, of course, there are tools, there are technologies that have been built over time that we will look at as, for example, hashing and the likes, that have definitely been used to be able to certify the integrity of a specific document or text or otherwise. So if I'm sending something over the network, there are, of course, going to be multiple factors that we are looking at here. So if, for example, I'm sending from sending data to an FTP server, in this case, from my machine, what I expect in this case, if I have a specific hash of a specific text on my machine, and I'm pushing this over to an FTP server that is probably seated in another room. In this case, FTP is a file transfer protocol in this case, and we find that once that file is sitting there, the hash in this case of this file has to be the same. So there are different tools that we basically can use in this case. There are some that are offline, there are some that are online, but it would be nice to just show basically what hashing is. So hashing basically looks at creating a specific type of a string of characters, in this case ASCII and numeric, that basically defines it's like a signature for a specific document. Whether it's a number, whether it's a string, whether it's a file, all these have different hashes. And of course, there's some hashing algorithms that come up with collisions, but the whole idea is at the source, in this case, of your network, and at the destination, the file should have the same hash in order for you to justify that it has not changed over the network.
The other question is about antiviruses. So I have an antivirus on my laptop. However, another antivirus appears and indicates that I have threats and I'm at risk. Should I access this antivirus? Sorry. So I think this is a case where this person has two antiviruses on their machine. Could you explain why, one of them is detecting the other as a virus?
Okay. One thing that we need to understand when we come to antiviruses is that antiviruses basically antiviruses rely on different what we look at as heuristics, and then of course what we're also looking at as like the modern day antiviruses have a lot of like cloud components that do auto analysis, and also we find that for one antivirus to the functionality that an antivirus basically uses to detect malicious software at a very core level, if we have to go deep into understanding the antivirus technology, it basically operates almost like a virus, but because it's one, you find that, for example, it's running as a high integrity process. It's probably trying to interact with also other different processes that are running. And once that behavior is what we would look at as something that is associated mostly with malware. Like, for example, when we are defining malware, that's what we're looking at as the malicious software. And if basically one antivirus sees, for example, another antivirus trying to do something that it would expect malware to do, it's going to definitely flag it. So most times it's not recommended to actually have two antiviruses because they will definitely have this conflicting behavior. And it's something that I have also experienced, and at least I understand from that point that that's basically what explains that.
All right, thank you, Peter. So you shouldn't have more than one antivirus on your devices. Yes, Malusi.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to what Peter did mention, and also to acknowledge that we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about antiviruses over the next week. So I think from what the participant asked, I think the way it is framed, it seems like there's another antivirus that appears. So it might be a pop-up that's trying to trick you into clicking. So this could be in of itself something we call an adware, I believe. So it's an advertisement telling you that there are threats existing on your computer, that you might be having viruses, and to use the proposed antivirus to clear out those viruses. So what I'd suggest you do immediately is very first thing, you want to run a malware scan on your computer. So I believe if you have a Windows operating system, then you can be able to run Windows Defender, and that should clear out any viruses that you currently have. If that's not possible, then you should probably update your computer to have the latest version of Windows Defender, and then clear out any antiviruses that exist. Just to clarify, this is something we're going to talk about in further detail in the next week. So if you have any more questions about antiviruses, they should be responded to in the next week, but feel free to keep asking them as well. Patricia?
Thank you, Malusi. So we have another question about how can we check the information stored on the internet about me? I can invite Sylvia to take that question.
Thank you so much, Patricia. The first thing you can start is by Googling yourself. So most likely when you Google your name, if you have a LinkedIn account, that will pop up. Then after that, you can try Googling yourself using other search engines, that is something like DuckDuckGo or Yahoo or Bing. Then you can go ahead and look at your social media handles. So check yourself on across different platforms using tools such as TweetDeck. Like for example, if you're using a tool to check whether there are other accounts that are using your handle, you can do that using open source tools. Then from there, you can, once you find what kind of information is out there about yourself, you can figure out a way to set your privacy settings to a way that if it's on Facebook, you ensure that only your friends can be able to access your information, and not all kind of information like your date of birth or where you live. That's not information you'd like all your friends to see you. Then depending on your country, you can look for public records in your country and figure out whether your name appears on any public records. So for example, in Kenya, you find, let's say if you've ever taken a loan, there are loan companies that have your names on their databases that are accessible to anyone. So you can try figure out how to check your name on those platforms. That is among many of the ways you can look for your information. And doing this act is called doxing, DOXXING. You can research more on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. So after this, maybe you can take some time to Google yourself and see what information comes up. If any information comes up that you would not be comfortable having on the internet, you can clean up your social media handles, and you can even request Google to take down some of the information that is available about you online. So this is a fun exercise that you can do after the session. We have another question around viruses, and so I'll invite Malusi to take this. What are the effects? What are the effects of viruses on data, and can attacker be able to install a virus on a device?
Right, so there are two parts to that question, I believe, and I will start with the first one, and I think this is something Mr. Peter has covered already. So when it comes to viruses and how they impact data, I tend to think of them in three ways. So viruses can, of course, corrupt the data. Secondly, certain types of viruses can be used to steal data. So this is something like a keylogger that can read sensitive information as you type. It can read exactly what you're typing and transfer that information to the attacker. There's also viruses that are able to encrypt your data, and then an attacker is able to ask for some. So an attacker holds that data ransom and asks you for some form of payment in order to release the data back to you. So there are different ways in which viruses can affect data and devices. So essentially there's corruption, there's deletion, and there's also, it can be taken at ransom, but this is just one of the few ways. The second question was, do you mind repeating the second question, Patricia?
Can an attacker be able to install a virus on a device?
Yes. And I believe this is the whole point, perhaps, of the course itself. So attackers have various ways of installing malicious software on your computer. So there's phishing attacks. There is download that have been corrupted, that have, you download stuff online that has viruses embedded onto them. There are adware, such as the virus scenario that we talked about a little earlier. So there are very, very, very many ways in which attackers are able to put viruses in your devices. There are also stuff like surveillance technology, but this is a bit more advanced. And this is, I think, something that Peter works quite a lot in, how to develop malware that can be used across networks and on devices that may not be detectable by viruses. So there are many ways that attackers have to transfer viruses and to spread viruses across network. Yeah, so this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail in the third week, as well as it was covered quite extensively in the previous installation of cybersecurity training for teachers. So yeah, I'm going to pass it back to Patricia, unless there's something I've missed and you might want to add on to.
I know you elaborated it quite well. Thank you for that. We have a question around encrypted PDFs. Is it possible to send an encrypted PDF file and limit the number of printouts to make by the receiver? I do know that there are tools that exist, for example, Adobe, where you're able to restrict printing altogether, but I'm not sure whether you can be able to restrict to a certain number of copies. Peter, have you encountered anywhere you're able to just restrict the number of copies?
I don't think I have encountered at account level, so it's normally just either restrict or, yeah, allow.
Yeah. Yes, Malusi.
So I do have a service that can restrict the number of downloads for a certain PDF or any shared file. It's called Treasurit. It is free. We use it quite a lot in our work. So you can restrict the number of people who can download, and you can also restrict whether or not your file can be downloaded. So it can only be, if I send you the link, it can only be read only. So you can only read, you cannot really download the file itself. So there are limitations you can put to ensure that your data remains your data up until you decide that someone is able to download it or not. In terms of printouts, I really don't know as well. So maybe that's something we need to look into.
Yeah.
The application is called Treasurit. I'm gonna put it where? In the chat.
In the chat? Yes, in the chat. That would be good. I think this is a question for Peter. How can we create a mask in data? I think you spoke a little bit about, you mentioned that data masking. So how can we be able to create masks in data?
Well, with masking, there are tools basically that can be used. Normally, most of them are just basically at the level of, for example, the tools that I've worked with. When you're looking at masking, we look at it if we're looking at it from a data security point. For example, when developers are working back end and they are supposed to, for example, like as we discussed during the example where we have receipts that are basically shared, we find that at a code level they do implement this specific functionality to ensure that we're able to do that in the receipts that, for example, that we obtain from like these different payment systems that we get. At the level of, for example, when you're sending emails, when you're working probably in an organization, there are some tools in this case that you can install on your host. And when, for example, you're uploading the document and it triggers sensitive data, it will ask you, for example, can I mask? And all you have to do is accept, and then the tool goes ahead and blanks out most of this information, and then you can upload. So there are tools basically that are done that do that, and I'll share some links to these because well, I have used Forcepoint to some extent on my side, and definitely achieved some functionality around data masking.
All right, thank you, Peter. You can either share the links with us and then we'll include it in the Q&A document, or you can also add them in the chat as well. I think there's another question for you. What is the difference between data protection, security, and privacy? I think that's a big one.
Yeah. So when we're looking at data protection, we are basically looking at strategy majorly, because you have heard of data protection acts, and most of this is majorly around the overall strategy we're looking at to safeguard the sensitive information from being lost or unauthorized access. That's like the simplest way to understand it. And then when we're looking at, for example, data security, we're now looking at basically the measures. These are the controls that we are putting into place to ensure that we protect this information from being accessed by what? By unauthorized users in this case. Then also when we are defining, for example, privacy, privacy, now we're looking at the handling, in this case, the handling, the processing and the protection of the data with a focus. We are focusing at this point on individuals and basically the standards that we set. So that's how you would define the three. One looks at policy, the other one looks at controls, and then this one looks at the handling in this case.
All right, thank you for differentiating that. We have a question on shadow IT. Please help me out with the term shadow IT, and I will direct that to Linda.
Hello, thank you, Patricia, for the question. According to my understanding, shadow IT refers to IT that is used within organization, but is not within the framework of the organization. For example, bringing your own device, you might find that your organization does not allow you to bring your own device to work, but you carry it. And there are reasons why you maybe want to bring your own device or you want to use shadow IT. One is maybe because you are ignorant, you don't know about your organization policies. Another one, maybe you want preference, maybe you're bringing your device which is maybe improved, or rather you're used to a certain device. Let's say maybe you want to use a Mac and your organization is offering a Windows machine. So you might find yourself maybe carrying your own device. Another thing that can lead you to can cause people, or rather can cause shadow IT or people to use shadow IT. It's because of maybe speed. For example, when you are browsing with the organization data, you find that maybe it's a bit slow. I mean, your organization internet, you're using your organization's internet to browse, you find that it's a bit slow and you want to maybe have faster internet. So you bring your own, let's say, pocket Wi-Fi to work, which is basically bring your device, but it's not allowed. Another issue, maybe it's just because the IT team within the organization has not laid out the rules, or rather the policies. They have not made the staff aware of the policies that exist. So that is what it means by shadow IT, using IT which is not within the framework of the organization. And I've also explained about the reasons why people end up using shadow IT. If there's any other explanation or additional information, kindly contribute to it.
Thank you, Linda. I think you give good examples that show shadow IT. I think another thing would be cloud services. Sometimes you can find employees uploading organizations' data and information onto cloud services so that they're able to access the data from anywhere. And sometimes that's the cloud services they're using are personal ones and not the workspaces that have been commissioned by the organization. So that is another example of shadow IT. Let's see another question we can tackle. There's a question here, Peter, around the demo that you did about protecting documents with passwords. One of our participants did not understand how a password meant to open a document in transit can be sent to the receiver. So you've protected your document with a password, but you've sent it to someone else and you also want to share the password. How do you do that?
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. So normally, I think during the demo, I did mention that you use a different channel in this case. For example, we have seen scenarios where you're trying to log into maybe your Gmail on a new device, and you're typing in your password, and then Google is like, I have sent you an OTP on your mobile. Please check it, and then you can validate that it's you, so that you can be able to access this. So in the same element, basically, with this, when you're sharing, for example, critical information, you should not always use the same channel to, for example, share a password that's to a document, for example, in this case that we put. Now imagine, for example, you send an email, and on that email you have the password of the document that you're sharing. That would definitely be a bad practice, and it's not encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So if you're sending your document on email, you can use, let's say, WhatsApp or Signal to send the password, so that you've separated the channels that you use to share the documents. We have a question on data recovery. How do you recover data from physical theft? I think one, how to respond first would be either to report this to local authorities. Again, this depends on the data that you have lost and the sensitivity of it. So there are laws that require you to share those things and be able to report what has been lost, especially if that data is sensitive and belongs to other people. They deserve to be notified about this loss. And the other thing would be, if you've set up remote wipe or find location or find the device, you can be able to use those two services to either wipe data from the device so that it does not land in the wrong hands, or you can also use Find My Device to be able to locate your device. And if you're able to locate your device, it will be best to report it to local authorities so that they can be able to either follow up for you, because you also don't want to put yourself in danger while you're trying to recover from physical theft. The other thing we encourage is for you to have backups, so that just in case you're not able to recover your devices or the data that was stored in those devices, then you still have access to your information. So we recommend that you back up information, any sensitive information stored within your devices. Please ensure that you have backed it up. You can back up using either physical hard drives that you've also encrypted, or you can use cloud services such as Google Drive, OneDrive. All these are services that you can be able to back up data. But please make sure that this data that you're backing up is well protected as well. Malusi, did you have something to add? I saw you had a hand raised.
I did, but you already mentioned cloud backup. So to reduce the impact of theft of devices, it is important to do so, particularly with phones. I know like a lot of countries have likelihood of theft of phones. So most phones these days come with an additional cloud service. So with Samsung and Android, they have Google. With iPhones, you have iCloud. So make it a practice to always back up your data at least regularly, weekly or whatever time frame you might need. Yeah, that was my addition, and you mentioned it, so I was just stacking it up as well.
All right, thank you for that. All right, we are at the end of our webinar. There are very many other questions that we have not gotten to, but we will answer them offline and share it together with, share the questions and answers together with the webinar recording and Mr. Elolu's presentation as well. So before we finish, we just wanted to reiterate something about the participation in the WhatsApp group. We recommend that we continue to be respectful of one another, and also we stay within the topic of discussion, which is cybersecurity. And also let's be kind to one another and receptive to different opinions as well. So please, let's remain respectful, let's remain on topic and on course to finish the remaining weeks of the course as well. Thank you very much for participating today. Thank you, Mr. Peter, for your wonderful presentation and for the demos that you did. They were very relevant to the audience, and I saw a lot of comments, people thanking you. So thank you very much for gracing the occasion, and to my fellow facilitators for also supporting us in answering the questions. Have a lovely rest of your day.